The line outside the theater curled around the block like a restless snake, buzzing with nervous laughter, rehearsed notes, and whispered dreams. Some clutched guitars, others balanced sheet music in trembling hands. Cameras moved like silent predators, capturing every hopeful face, every flicker of ambition. Above the grand entrance, the glowing sign for America's Got Talent shimmered against the afternoon sky, promising everything and nothing at the same time. At the very end of the line stood a boy who didn't quite seem to belong. His shirt was clean but worn thin, the fabric softened by years of washing. His shoes had lost their original color, scuffed into a dull memory of what they used to be. Slung over his shoulder was a small, weathered bag, too small to carry much, but clearly holding everything he considered important. His name was Mateo Reyes. "Hey, man," someone in line ahead of him chuckled, glancing back. "You here to audition too?" Mateo nodded, offering a small, polite smile. "With what? Magic tricks? Comedy?" Another voice chimed in, louder this time, inviting a few nearby contestants to turn and look. Mateo hesitated for a fraction of a second. I sing." That was all it took. A ripple of laughter passed through the group, not cruel enough to be called outright bullying, but sharp enough to sting. One guy with a sleek leather jacket smirked openly. "Everyone sings, bro." "Yeah," another added, "but not everyone makes it past 10 seconds. Mateo said nothing. He simply adjusted the strap of his bag and stared ahead, as if the massive doors of the theater could somehow swallow his doubts along with him. Inside his chest, though, his heart pounded like it was trying to escape. He hadn't always imagined standing here. Back in his hometown in the Philippines, music wasn't a dream, it was survival. His mother used to hum while cooking, turning ordinary meals into something warm and comforting. His father had a voice too, deep and steady, though he rarely sang after long days of work. When Mateo was younger, he would sit by the window during the heavy rains, listening to the rhythm of water on tin roofs and trying to match it with his voice. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't trained, but it was real. Everything changed the year his father got sick. Hospital bills piled up faster than they could be paid. His mother took on extra work. Mateo started singing in the streets, not for applause, but for coins. At first, people barely noticed him. Then, slowly, they began to stop. A few pesos here, a kind smile there. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. And somewhere along the way, people started saying things like, "You have something special." Mateo never fully believed it, but he held onto it anyway. Next, the voice snapped him back to the present. The line had moved faster than he realized. Suddenly, he was at the registration desk, blinking under bright lights and sharper scrutiny. Name, age, talent, Mateo Reyes, 17, singing. The woman behind the desk barely looked up as she handed him a number. "Good luck," he whispered a quiet, "Thank you," and moved on, clutching the paper like it was fragile. Hours later, he found himself backstage. The energy was different here, thicker, heavier. Some contestants paced like caged animals. Others sat in silence, eyes closed, lips moving in quiet rehearsals. A few exuded confidence so loudly it felt like noise. Mateo sat alone in a corner. From somewhere beyond the curtain, he could hear the muffled roar of the audience. Every cheer felt like a reminder of how big this stage was, and how small he felt. "You okay?" He looked up. A girl about his age stood nearby, holding a microphone and offering a gentle smile. "You look like you might pass out." Mateo let out a nervous laugh. "I might." She sat down beside him. "First time?" He nodded. "Same," she said. "But hey, we made it this far, right?" He considered that. "Yeah, I guess we did. What are you singing?" Mateo hesitated again. "Something important." She grinned. "Those are always the best kind." A voice called her name, and she stood up quickly. "That's me. Good luck, Mateo." "You too." He watched her disappear toward the stage, then looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Mateo Reyes. His name echoed through the backstage area. His turn. The walk to the stage felt unreal. Lights grew brighter with every step. The noise of the audience sharpened into distinct cheers and chatter. The massive stage opened up before him like an ocean of possibility and danger. When he finally stepped into the spotlight, the brightness blinded him for a moment. Then he saw them. The judges. At the center sat Simon Cowell, leaning back with his usual unreadable expression. Beside him were the other judges, each with their own mix of curiosity and skepticism. Simon raised an eyebrow slightly. "Hello." Mateo swallowed. "Hello, sir. What's your name?" "Mateo Reyes." "And where are you from?" "Mateo." "The Philippines, but I came here for this." A small murmur ran through the audience. Simon tilted his head. "That's a long way to come. How old are you?" 17. "And you're singing today?" "Yes, sir." Simon glanced briefly at the others, then back at Mateo. "All right, whenever you're ready." Mateo nodded. This was it. He adjusted the microphone, closed his eyes for a brief second, and took a deep breath. From somewhere deep inside him, a memory surfaced, his mother's voice, soft and steady. "Sing like you mean it." He opened his eyes, and began. The first note was quiet. So quiet that a few people in the audience leaned forward, unsure if he had actually started. Then the second note came. Stronger, clearer. By the third line, something shifted. His voice carried a texture that didn't match his age, a rawness shaped by struggle, by long nights, by hope stretched thin but never breaking. It wasn't just singing, it was storytelling. The audience fell silent, completely silent. Backstage, contestants who had been chatting moments ago stopped mid-sentence. On stage, the judges straightened almost imperceptibly. Simon's expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Mateo continued. Every word seemed to land heavier than the last, as if he was placing pieces of his life onto the stage, one by one. The melody rose, and with it, so did his confidence. He wasn't the boy at the end of the line anymore. He wasn't the kid people laughed at. He was something else, something undeniable. Halfway through the performance, a woman in the audience wiped her eyes. A man shook his head in disbelief. Someone whispered, "Wow." Mateo didn't see any of it. He was somewhere else now, back on those rain-soaked streets, singing under flickering lights, hoping someone would listen. Now, everyone was. As the song built toward its climax, his voice soared. It wasn't perfect in the technical sense. There were edges, imperfections, but those imperfections made it real. Made it human, and in that moment, that mattered more than anything else. Simon leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. He was focused, completely, utterly, captivated. The final note hung in the air like a fragile thread. Mateo held it just long enough to make time feel suspended. Then he let it go. Silence. A single heartbeat. Two. And then, the theater erupted. Applause crashed over him like a wave. People stood, cheering, clapping, some even shouting his name though they had just learned it. Mateo blinked, overwhelmed. For a second, he didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't believe it. The camera cut to the judges. One of them was already on their feet. Another clapped with genuine enthusiasm. And Simon Cowell sat very still, looking directly at Mateo, not speaking, not moving, just staring. The audience gradually quieted, sensing something unusual. Simon finally leaned closer to the microphone. Well, he paused, and for once, it seemed like he was searching for words. That, he began slowly, was not what I was expecting. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Mateo's heart pounded again, but this time, it wasn't fear. Simon continued, "When you walked out here, I'll be honest, I didn't think much of it." Another pause. "But then you started singing." He leaned back slightly, shaking his head. And suddenly, everything changed. Mateo felt his throat tighten. "You have something," Simon said. "Not just a good voice. Something real. Something that people can feel." The audience murmured in agreement. "And do you know how rare that is?" Mateo shook his head, unable to speak. Simon gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Very." The other judges chimed in, praising his authenticity, his emotion, his ability to connect. But it was Simon's silence before speaking that everyone remembered. Because for those few seconds, one of the toughest critics in the world had been completely speechless. Backstage, the same contestants who had laughed earlier now stared at the monitor in stunned silence. Was that the same guy? Someone whispered. No one answered. They didn't need to. On stage, Mateo stood there, chairs threatening to fall but not quite spilling over. Simon leaned forward one last time. "Matteo, welcome to the competition." The audience erupted again, and this time, Matteo smiled. Not the small, polite smile from before. A real one, the kind that comes from being seen. As he walked off stage, the world felt different. Lighter, brighter, like something had shifted permanently. The girl he had spoken to earlier rushed up to him. "That was incredible." Matteo laughed softly, still overwhelmed. I don't even know what happened." "You showed them," she said simply. He thought about that. About the laughter in the line. About the doubts. About the long journey from a small street in the Philippines to this massive stage. Maybe it wasn't about proving them wrong. Maybe it was about proving something to himself. Later that night, as he sat alone again, the noise finally fading, Matteo looked at his hands. They weren't shaking anymore. For the first time in a long time, he felt steady. Whatever happened next, win or lose, he had already crossed a line he once thought was impossible. He had stepped onto one of the biggest stages in the world. And left one of its toughest judges speechless. And no one was laughing anymore.